Next slide. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. This is our seasonal update on upcoming events and recent reports and resources from our 6 member organizations. Next slide. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on the National Council on Electricity Policy's homepage. During the webinar, please feel free to type any questions into the Q&A box. You should be able to access that at the bottom of your screen, and we will follow up either during or after the meeting. Next slide. Again, my name is Deborah Reynolds. I am a Senior Regulatory Policy Specialist with the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and I am the staff support person for the National Council on Electricity Policy. My contact information is here on this slide, and if I can help you in any way, please don't hesitate to contact me. Next slide. The National Council on Electricity Policy is a forum that is supported by the Department of Energy to bring together state electricity decision makers so that we can look at the many elements together that affect both state energy policy and the electricity grid. The NCEP members include all the staff and officials of all 6 of our member organizations. And so starting at the top of the logos on the slide and moving clockwise, NARUC, which is the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, NGA, the National Governors Association, NACA, the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislators, NASUCA, the National Association of Utility Consumer Advocates, and NASIO, the National Association of State Energy Officials. So as you can imagine, this is a lot of people across the nation. Next slide. Today, you'll be hearing from me and from a representative of each of our member organizations as listed here. We have all provided slides which will be posted on our website so that you can access any of the links to the resources or the events that we're about to cover. We hope you find this helpful. Next slide. Because the NCEP has so many members, as I mentioned, we have a pretty large executive committee. It is 17 members. The executive committee is regionally diverse, and it includes representatives from each of our member organizations. The executive committee has recently elected Chairman Marissa Paslick-Gillette of Connecticut Public Utilities Regulatory Authority as the NCEP chair, and elected Mike Dowd, the director of the Air Division of the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, and Jennifer Easler, the consumer advocate of the state of Iowa, as our vice chairs. We are very pleased to have this leadership in place and very happy to be working with this committee. Next slide. This next slide is the rest of the list of the executive committee members. And now we're moving on to resources. Thank you. So the NCEP develops a number of resources every year and provides access to these resources, as I've mentioned, on the website. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that we have a resources site and a webinar site, and both of those have useful things for you. So our mini guide series, which is listed on the left, is a series to promote dialogue among state electricity decision makers by highlighting examples of successful engagement across the NCEP members. Each mini guide is only 12 pages long. They are very readable, and they feature collaborative approaches, lessons learned, and interviews with leading state and local decision makers. We hope that you will go there when you have work that you need to do with other state agencies. Then in July of this year, we released 2 new reports. The first is a collaboration on workforce development, and the second is a report on aggregated distributed energy resources, or ADER. The workforce development brief highlights partnerships between state government agencies and higher education institutions to identify and attract diverse talent, particularly recent graduates and early career professionals, into public sector work. We hope that you find this useful as you are looking for your next people. The second report I mentioned, ADER, builds upon the existing literature and leading examples of ADER pricing and the programs in practice so that it can equip commissioners and staff at both PUCs public utility commissions, and state energy offices with the fundamentals of ADER grid services, evaluation options, and approaches to compensation. I will just mention that the webinar for this last report on ADER was very well received. It occurred on September 27th, and we received multiple comments thanking us for all the useful tools that were provided in that report. Next slide. Okay. I am really pleased to be able to invite all of you to join us in Phoenix on October 29th and 30th of this year. Yes, that's in 2 weeks. The NCEP holds a meeting each year for its member organizations to come together and discuss a specific topic. This year, we're going to be working on developing a framework or guide for designing and critiquing community engagement approaches. We have lined up at least 2 speakers from each of the member organizations to present community engagement case studies, and we're going to spend part of the meeting working on the development of that framework. We hope that you can join us. I'll let you know that the hotel block is closing on Tuesday, October 15th, and of course the conference, as I've already mentioned, is October 29th and 30th. That QR code on the screen, you can take, you can use your phone, and you can register right now if you would like. We'll leave that up for a tiny second longer. On our next slide, though, I would invite you all to please visit the NCEP website, which is www.naruc.org/NCEP. And that, again, is where you will find all of the resources that I've mentioned and links to a number of the other resources you're going to hear about today. Please do also sign up for our NCEP listserv. And you do that by creating a profile for yourself at www.naruc.org/mynaruc, and then adding the NCEP listserv to your list of subscriptions. Again, that is it for me. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you again so much for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, please don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's anything I can do to make your life easier. Next slide. Now we're going to hear from Miles Keogh, the Executive Director of the National Association of Clean Air Agencies. Thank you, Miles.
Hey, friends. It's Miles. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Clean Air Agencies. Am I driving the slides, or you go to the next one for me, please? Oh, love it. Thank you. NACA is the National Association of the state and local agencies that implement the Clean Air Act. We have 155 agencies in 40 states. We have a governance structure that has a state of everything and a local of everything. So all our committees have a state and local co-chair, and all our governance is done with state and local co-vice presidents and co-presidents and co-treasurers, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, the folks who are in the cockpit are Dr. Latrice Babin from Harris County, Texas, which is right outside of Houston, and Kendall Stegman, who runs the air agency in the beautiful state of Oklahoma. She's also, I believe, a participant in the National Council. Our agencies implement programs in coordination with EPA, and they also implement a lot of their own programs under authorities under state and local laws and codes. And the way it's like, the reason it's like that is because there were local agencies first. Places like Los Angeles and Cincinnati and Chicago and places like that had air agencies stretching back into the 1880s. And some of our largest agencies are locals. States came along a little bit later, and then about 20 years later, the EPA was stood up. And so the whole clean air regulatory structure is built with that three-legged stool, so that co-regulation isn't a quirk, it's a pillar of the implementation of the Clean Air Act. And my slides have a bunch of the stuff that our agencies do: planning, siting, monitoring, enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll see that that's a list that's fairly, it sounds a lot like what other agencies do just for our little corner of the world. Next slide, please. Everybody loves a map. Here's a map. We've got states where there are just a state agency. We've got states where there are just a number of local agencies, and we've got um, states where we have both state and local agencies, and there are a few states in there that don't participate in NACA. I'm going to flag some of our recent actions that are of a technical assistance nature. And my hope is that either these will be useful to you in understanding the kind of work that we do for technical assistance. For the most part, we're a policy organization. We participate in rulemakings and legal actions and those kinds of things. But we got 4 things that we've done in the last couple of months that I think either give you a flavor for the kind of technical assistance work we do, or if you're interested in seeing some of this replicated or demonstrated for your constituencies, I'm happy to talk to you all about that and try and set it up. One is, unfortunately, we have had the bad luck to be providing and organizing and providing mutual assistance to 2 of our Clean Air Agency members, our agency in Asheville, Buncombe County in North Carolina, and our 2 agencies in Florida, in Hillsborough County and Pinellas County. All of them have had a heck of a week, a couple weeks dealing with extreme storms and hurricanes that's been in the news. You guys know about that, but they've had buildings damaged and equipment damaged, and we're organizing a mutual aid effort. That's something that NACA does every once in a while when there's a wildfire or when there's some other event that requires us to come together as a family. We do that and transfer equipment and share expertise and that kind of stuff. So I'm sorry to report that we've been doing some mutual aid. Last week we ran a really great interactive workshop as part of our meeting. Actually, it was this week with the Department of Energy. They have a really great interactive game called Harnessing Hydrogen. And in teams, you go about building a hydrogen supply chain. In fact, you build 4 of them. One of them emphasizes low costs. One of them emphasizes environmental justice. One emphasizes the lowest greenhouse gas and air pollution emissions. And then you build a 4th one that meets your own sets of interests. And if you're interested in participating in that, the DOE did a bang up job at facilitating that, and our guys know how to play it now too. And I think it's really well worth doing. We did the technical support to try and put that on and put that out for our members. We're also working on a bunch of the forthcoming power plant rules that EPA is talking about. They have some non-regulatory information gathering that they're doing on that. They have 3 that are looking like they'll come towards us. One on hitting the categories of sources that were excluded from their previous greenhouse gas rules under Section 111 of the Clean Air Act for greenhouse gas emissions. It looks like they'll do a new source performance standard, updating their 2006 NSPS for NOx from gas-fired combustion turbines. And it looks like they'll do some action to update the NESHAPs, the air toxic standards that correlate with the operation of combustion turbines that run on natural gas, existing combustion turbines. That's real important for frontline communities that are exposed to things like formaldehyde, et cetera. And we expect those rulemakings early next year, maybe even before the end of the calendar year, depending on how things go. And finally, we've been talking with some of the folks who we know through the National Council, but internally trying to teach our folks about mobile sources infrastructure. As you well know, there are some really impressive challenges around building ginormous truck stops that fuel electrified freight transport and the like. Sometimes those things can have the same kinds of power requirements as a small town or the like, and the permitting questions around those are fairly robust. We're interested in connecting with the NASIO folks and the NARUG folks about things like how do you get a substation into place fast enough to meet the requirements under the Clean Air Act for heavy-duty vehicles, medium-duty vehicles, and light-duty vehicles. Skip ahead at least 2 slides, please. Thanks, that's me. So that's what we're doing. I hope if I can do anything to make your problems my problems, you'll reach out to me. Thanks for the time today.
Dan Love, from National Governors Association, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And it is great to see everybody on the line and be back on this call with friends. If we can go ahead, I think 2 slides. Perfect. So I'm Dan Loff, the Energy Program Director at the National Governors Association. Just be very brief since many of you probably know who we are, but we are the membership organization for the 55 state and territory governors across the US. Very much a bipartisan organization like others on the line. But what makes us unique is that we are not limited to energy and environmental work. My team, of course, we focus on energy full time, but we have colleagues across the organization doing everything from cybersecurity to healthcare delivery, homeland security, public safety, economic development, et cetera. So a lot of our work focuses on bringing those silos together within our organization and hopefully within the states as well to see how those groups can inform energy planning and how energy planning can support the range of policy objectives that a governor might have. Our chair this year is Colorado Governor Jared Polis, and our vice chair is Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt. I'm going to the next slide. I also have a map and wanted to share this with everybody. I know the presidential election is, of course, getting the bulk of the press these days, but there are about, I believe it's 13 gubernatorial elections taking place across the US as well. And we have incoming governors seeking re-election in 5 of those states and territories. So we're anticipating a significant amount of turnover in the coming months. And are really eager and excited to see how that all turns out. We'll be hosting what we call our seminar for new governors later in the month of November, so just a few weeks following the election, where we'll be bringing in newly elected governors alongside some returning governors to really explore what it means to govern in our states and territories. But moving to our energy work and going to the next slide. So I co-lead what we call our Energy Policy Learning Network, and this is a network of governor's energy policy advisors. About 3/4 of them sit directly in the governor's office. Another quarter are dual-hatted as state energy officials or cabinet secretaries in related areas. And we support them through a range of events and meetings and briefings. I'll talk about some of them in just a bit. Along with regular technical assistance, we get them together on calls, we do webinars, and frankly, we're just here as a resource to all of our state colleagues as needed. So I have names of my colleagues here, I just so you all are aware, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move forward to some of our recent work and resources. So going to the next slide. I'll start off with just a few new papers that we have, 2 new papers and one that I tend to keep on here as a more evergreen and unfortunately timely resource. But this first one is a paper we released earlier in the year, exploring the actions that governors and state leaders can take to build a more robust cybersecurity talent pipeline for the energy sector. So this looks specifically at industrial control systems and operational technology, cybersecurity, where there are some workforce gaps, and explores what state leaders can do around credentialing, around getting the word out on the need and really building resources and training mechanisms for the sector and for the industry broadly. It follows an experts roundtable that we hosted in June of 2023, where we brought energy, cybersecurity, and workforce leads together from a handful of states alongside the energy sector and federal government to really explore what that solution set might look like. Going to the next slide. And this is I think, unfortunately, a timely resource in light of the horrific hurricanes that we've recently seen in the Southeast. But this paper that we released just in the last several days addresses energy resilience needs in half a dozen communities of individuals who could be particularly at risk or vulnerable during a prolonged energy outage. So I listed those communities out here, rural communities, elderly individuals, those affected by chronic illness and disabilities. And while this isn't a comprehensive list, our hope is that it can help state leaders and our members really adjust their energy emergency planning and response to make sure that those individuals who would have a difficult time in a prolonged outage get the resources and support that they need. And the evergreen resource that I had mentioned, going to the next slide, is our executive authority during energy emergencies roadmap for governors. So this we do update periodically, and it is less of a narrative and much more of a resource of actions that governors can take and the authorities that they, perhaps not universally, but tend to have to accelerate response to an energy emergency, facilitate restoration on the part of the utilities, things along those lines. So it looks at waivers, waiver requests, and the other actions that they can take when these emergencies occur. So jumping ahead to the next slide, I'll end by highlighting just a couple of our key projects from this past year and then some of our ongoing work for the rest of the year. But a few items that I wanted to mention. First, one that we are very excited about is just going to be taking place in the next week, October 16th to 17th, up in Boston. NGA and NASIO have been partnering very closely over the last several months to plan a state transmission summit, in which we're going to bring, I think we have about 37 states and territories currently registered, to come and really explore what the state executive role is in transmission planning, transmission expansion, siting, permitting. So looking at the, where governors and state energy officials and energy offices can step in to contribute and support those conversations that are happening across many of our states. Earlier in the year, three others that I want to mention where we have or will soon have some resources out. One is back in May, we hosted a first of its kind convening of all 5 territories and the state of Hawaii to explore the unique challenges that they face around energy security and resilience. So this was in Honolulu. The photo that's here is actually of 3 of those governors, Governor Mauga from American Samoa, Governor Green, and First Lady from the state of Hawaii, and Governor Bryan from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And it was really a fantastic meeting where we documented some shared challenges, but also actions that can be taken to support those islanded communities. And we look forward to continuing that work into 2025 and hopefully beyond. Also in partnership with NASIO, another new resource that we have is this Comprehensive Energy Planning 101 webinar series, where we worked with them to scope, host, and then record a series of 6 webinars over the last several months that really address multiple stages and facets of statewide energy planning. I can take very little credit for this one. It was colleagues at both organizations who completed the work, but it really did come out, I think, phenomenally well. And I'd encourage anybody who's interested to take a look. And then lastly is a recent roundtable we did in the spirit of collaboration with most of the groups on the call. So NARUC, NASIO, NCSL, and NEMA to explore the uptick in physical attack on energy systems, including the grid and power substations, and to identify solutions for states to protect those assets. I think the next slide will be my last, but very quick here, since I talked about a lot of this work already. It just highlights a few of our upcoming written products and some of the work that we are planning on in the coming year. The ones that are mentioned as tentative are going to be funding dependent, but we are fairly confident that those are all going forward and look forward to working with you all as needed. So certainly happy to take questions, and in the
Thank you so much,
interest of
Sandy.
time, we'll go to the next colleague.
Thank you, Catherine Reed from NASIO.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Catherine Reed, and I serve as Senior Program Director with the National Association of State Energy Officials, also known as NASIO. Next slide, please. For those who are not familiar with NASIO, we're a national nonprofit that supports all 56 state and territory energy offices throughout the United States. And we do that in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. So as I said, we serve as a resource for and about state energy offices on a wide spectrum of energy topics through a variety of means. We host regional and national dialogues on emerging energy issues. We have also established standing committees, task forces, and working groups on a broad spectrum of energy topics, some of which you see represented here. And we pull together and develop various resources, reports, tools, white papers, one-pagers. Of particular note to this audience, I would say, is our NASIO Electricity Committee. We convene state and territory energy offices plus our affiliate members for discussions and exchanges of best practice and peer learning on electricity issues ranging from transmission and distribution planning, integration of clean energy generation resources, both at the distribution and bulk power levels. We look at interdependencies with other sectors, such as transportation, buildings, oil and natural gas, water, and also look at the resilience of the electrical grid. Next slide, please. So while I'm sure is the case for all of our partner organizations on this call, the list of initiatives and activities is far too long for an 8-minute presentation. So I just wanted to highlight a few areas that may be of interest. You can see these are some broad categories of some work that we are engaged in currently. I will say, for example, on the Infrastructure Act and the investment and the IRA, we are deeply engaged in working closely with DOE on support of the states who are, for example, implementing the home energy rebate programs, Homes and Here's. On the transmission and distribution planning side, largely due to increased interest from states to delve more deeply into these topics because of the drivers of an aging grid, resilience concerns, increased weather events as we're seeing demand growth. There's just a lot more focus among energy offices on these topics. So we have launched 3 new working groups, a transmission working group, a distribution working group, as well as a data working group to support these issues and to delve more deeply. And so we're doing that in terms of roundtables, forums, educational webinars. Also on the energy security side, I know that Dan highlighted some really incredible resources that they have, and we as NASIO do support our state energy offices in developing the state energy security plans, especially now that there are sort of enhanced requirements since the IIJA was passed. And part of that support has been also we've had now 2 in-person energy security boot camps, which have been really a great opportunity to convene emergency managers who focus on the energy sector and bringing them together and to help identify issues of risk mitigation and risk assessment and response. On the topic of energy equity and justice, just checking the time, we have just wrapped up a series of regional roundtables through this fantastic partnership that we've had with NARUC along with NSUCA and NGA bringing together representatives from all of our respective organizations or our areas, and look at equity in terms of the programs, policies, and the regulatory space. That's been really rewarding, and it's been a fantastic partnership. And I think the participants have gotten a great deal out of that, to be able to have those opportunities to share perspectives and learn from one another. And then finally, I'll just highlight on the grid resilience side, it seems to be a really hot topic these days. We are continuing to work with DOE and the labs and NARUC in support of implementing grid resilience work, and especially regarding the 40101D implementation, since many states are the ones who the state energy offices are in many cases the lead implementers of that formula grant. And we have been working with all of those entities on a series of cohorts on different topics, and NASIO in particular has been focusing on risk mitigation, risk assessment, and grant implementation. So that's just a sampling of some of these other topics. And then in the last few minutes, I just want to say, next slide, please. We do have a series, we have developed a series of reports and resources. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but you'll see all the different topics: transmission, clean hydrogen, EV charging, equity, buildings, nuclear, and storage. A lot of these we do in partnership with other organizations, so you'll see that noted. And the other thing I'll just say, hot off the press, there's been so much interest in FERC Order 1920 and what the role is for state energy offices. So we actually have just produced, hot off the press, it's a very brief kind of Q&A driven little explainer on that topic. So we're excited about that, but we'll have, access to all of this is available through our website. And then next slide, please. Upcoming events. Dan mentioned our transmission summit next week. We're super excited. It's been a fantastic partnership with NGA, and there's a great deal of interest in that topic. In terms of other in-person events, I'll just say we have upcoming later in October in Washington, a state solar cybersecurity workshop and exercise. We also, of course, are going to be participating in the annual meeting. I will be there in Arizona, super excited about that. And we are working, and I don't know, Danielle probably will touch on this, but we are working with NARUC on a series of regional trainings on integrated distribution system planning. This is sort of a nice follow-up to the work we did last year collectively, also with the labs. And then in February, NASIO has, we have these two big meetings per year. This is our Energy Policy Outlook Conference taking place in February in Washington. So in the final minute, I'll just say, we also have a series of virtual events, and I've listed them here on a variety of topics, but the best source of this, rather than my reading through this, is just to go to our website and click on events, and all of the events we have are listed there, and we welcome your participation. So with that, I thank you all. I think that is the last of the slides. Oh yes, and here's our team. I do want to say we have recently added a couple of people to our team. Camille Norton is our newest addition, and she's been a fantastic addition. And then we have two senior advisors on whom we rely quite heavily for their expertise. So we're really thrilled to have such a good team now. So thank you all for your time, and I will now move on to David Springy.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. My name is David Springy. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. Quite a mouthful, so we just go by NASUCA. NASUCA is the state statutory advocate. So when you think of the NARUC, State Public Utility Commissions created by statute, my members are also created by statute, but tasked with representing consumers of various forms before the state commissions and in the legal process that ensues. We've been around since 1979. Haven't been around quite that long. We have about 61 members operating in 45 states, the District of Columbia, Barbados, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. And again, we are tasked by law to represent consumers, which means we need to be independent of the commissions. We need to be able to take those orders to court. So we think of ourselves as the consumer's due process arm in the regulatory process. A number of our members do live within a state attorney general's offices, so they may fall under the NAG umbrella. And we have a number of non-statutory sort of affiliates, 501c3s that participate mainly in utility proceedings, California Turn, Cub, AARP. So next slide. In the theme of everyone needs a pretty map, here's a pretty map. So these are our members. The blue states are statutory. We have at least one member in all of those states. Some members we have more than one. Some states we have an independent and someone in the AG's office. Minnesota, interestingly, has somebody in the AG's office, somebody in the Department of Commerce tasked with representing consumers, and they have an independent 501c3 called Minnesota Cub. So you do have to kind of look around and see. There's a few states there that are not colored in, 5 in total that don't have some NSUCA representative of some variety. We're going to someday color those in. That's my goal in life. So thank you. Next slide. So I will say up front that NSUCA is a fairly small organization. Our national office now has 3 people in it. So we don't have sort of the horsepower to do the types of things that the other N groups on this call do. We do love working as part of the NCEP, as part of this larger group. It really helps us leverage up. These other groups, as you've seen so far, and NARUC, I think, is following me, do really great work, do a lot of great publications, and we freely steal all of those and send them to our membership. They are great resources for us, and they're just something that we don't internally have the capability of producing. But we do some interesting things. So one, I wanted to flag just our webpage, nsuka.org, and you can find some interesting things there. Number one being our list of members. So if you need to figure out who your consumer advocate is in your state, if you're involved in any of these proceedings, or if you just want to sort of reach out and have a conversation about energy policy, utility impacts, different things, easy button right on the front page there for our members. We also have in our resources our policy resolutions. Again, we've been around since 1979. We've written a lot of policy over those days, so we'd actually do speak to issues, and as any national association, once you write them down and wash them through the process and get a vote, then we can say NSUCA thinks or doesn't think something. So our policy resolutions are all there. The third bullet here, I do want to highlight for all of you that are playing in this space. We've experienced a lot of workforce turnover, as I think many of our other the other N groups have. And so our members tasked us with trying to put together just some basic training courses. So when we get a new employee in one of our offices, what do you give them? And so there's a button on our resources page for the regulatory basics courses. These are a set of webinars that are just basics. How do you do a revenue requirement? How do you do a cost of capital analysis for a rate case? How do you do cost allocation and rate design in a rate case? Free to everyone. Anyone can enjoy those. So again, if you're just sort of climbing into the space of the Public Utility Commission rate setting process, this is at least a simple place to start. There are obviously other rate schools. NARUC does some great rate schools. And this is not meant to supplant them, but it's something that is there. We do some work with DOE. We do a whole set of training. It's on the webpage with our DOE grid training. There's 20 some odd different encapsulated webinars there on DOE grid modernization training. And then we also have a series of NSUCA webinars that we put together on issues that are available. And then if you really want to join the White Hats and have some fun, we also have an employment opportunities page. So I encourage you to look at that. Next slide. So again, just focusing a little bit back on the DOE stuff, we do a webinar series each fall. We're getting that started. We have one next week on long duration storage. So we'll look forward to that. That webinar will be captured and put on that DOE webpage that we have on our website. And then we also do live training at our mid-year and annual meetings. And so we have our annual meeting coming up in Anaheim. We meet with NARUC, and so we'll do a couple of DOE training sessions there. So we'll try and capture those also. Next slide. And then just, again, we don't run the type of conferences that the other N groups do, but we do 2 association conferences a year. So, if you've ever been curious about what NSUCA does and what we talk about, you are free to come to one of our conferences. We will be with NARUC at the NARUC annual. Our NSUCA annual meeting is in Anaheim, November 10th through the 13th. So if you're wandering around, if you go to NARUC and you're wandering around, please look for the NSUCA signs. We are there too. We have a pretty good agenda that's coming out. And then we will do a mid-year meeting sometime in June of 2025. We do those sort of by ourselves, so it's a little different atmosphere than being with NARUC. But we were with NARUC at least one time every year at one of their meetings. So again, if you're playing around with NARUC, take a look for us. Next slide. And then just our staff. Sorry, I wanted to highlight here, after 9 years of running NCEP sort of solo by myself with help from Nicole, who runs my admin, we finally hired a deputy director. So Nina Suotake has joined us. I'm so excited. She's here to help me on policy and is really our sort of lead on all of the NCEP work and conference work. So thrilled to have Nina. She came up through California Turn and then spent the last few years out at the Washington State AG's office, our member office there. So very thrilled to have Nina on. I hope everyone gets a chance to meet her. And with that, I will kick it over. I believe Danielle Sass-Bernat is behind me. Danielle.
Thank you, David. It's been great to hear what all of our colleagues are up to across the country. I am Danielle Sass-Bernat, Senior Director for NARUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation. Next slide. And NARUC is the state association for the regulatory utility commissioners across the country. Our members are the commissioners and the commission staff in every state and territory. And they make decisions that are expected to be in the public interest and for the purposes of this discussion, specifically related to electricity policy. Next slide. The Center for Partnerships and Innovation is NARUC's technical assistance team. So we are the ones who produce all the papers and host many of the events, not the big three, but many of the events, and put together workshops and frameworks and things of that nature. And you can find a relatively up-to-date 2-page fact sheet for a quick synopsis of what's going on, what's recently been released, what of our activities are open to our members and to others by going to naruc.org/CPI. And up in the quick links is that fact sheet. We update that 3 times a year, aligned with our national conferences. So I'm going to go over some highlights right now, but you can grab that anytime you'd like. Next slide. Much like NASIO and national governors, NARUC also covers a wide range and breadth of topics, all related to the energy space. So generation, transmission, distribution, and customers, and then also a critically important crosscut of resilience and critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. So I'm just going to give you a smattering of recently released resources and events, but know that there are a lot of us here and we can help in many different areas. So feel free to reach out at any time. Next slide. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here talking about what some of these recent resources are. So different papers and publications that you can download. Since we last had our NCEP member update, we have produced papers on advanced nuclear use cases, and that's in part in partnership with NASIO, and also a microgrids resources guide, also with NASIO, that talks about how to get started with microgrids and how to navigate what resources are available from the state commission perspective, but also references some of the state energy office materials because we work in joint partnership together. We also just released a defense critical energy resilience framework. So for working with defense infrastructure, meaning the DoD, in your area, how might you engage? There's been a lot of work around hardening military facilities and microgrids, and yet they also interconnect to the broader grid. And so there's some valuable insights and lessons learned for engagement there. We have also been working closely with NASIO around DERs and published an extensive but very readable document on aggregated DER fundamentals this summer. And for the NARUC and RTO and other regional audiences, an important paper around interregional transmission and how different collaborative approaches and engagement could support the building of interregional transmission. Further back, we have been producing reports and materials on coal to nuclear possibilities with NASIO, cybersecurity baselines, what kinds of cybersecurity metrics could be in place and assurances for the distribution grid. and work around financing and mitigating stranded asset risk to utility customers from early retirements of power plants. And you can see we also have publications on natural gas, on electric vehicles, and more. So you can find these on the NARUC website. And as you can see, there's a link there in the corner of the slide. Next slide. We also host webinars nearly constantly. So there might be 1 to 3 in a week, depending on the week. And again, I would mention that there are URLs in the bottoms of the slides here. So if you go to naruc.org/events, you'll come to an event calendar, and that will share all of the different NARUC webinars that are happening for our members, open to the public. Some of them are even training courses, etc. But just to give you a sense of recordings and presentations that you can find from recent events, we had a great discussion recently about AI and balancing benefits and load growth expectations, one on networked geothermal, another one on hydropower, and on physical security. So quite a range. And then NARUC also runs a wide variety of members only working groups. So if you are a NARUC member and any of these topics are of interest, please don't hesitate to reach out. We run an electric vehicles working group that meets monthly. We are working closely with 21 states on how they are thinking about gas planning, and have posted webinars and educational learning sessions on a variety of topics that have been presented to that group, including renewable natural gas, non-pipeline alternatives, and others. And collaboratively with NASIO and Advanced Nuclear State Collaborative. And there was a webinar recently on nuclear power plant uprates. So how can you get the maximum benefit from existing power plants? Next slide. Looking ahead, as my colleagues did, I wanted to share, fortunately, at this point in the year, there aren't too many more in-person events. We've been on the road a lot. We will be on the road next week on gas planning. And then, as Deborah mentioned, we look forward to seeing many of you in Phoenix, Arizona at the end of October. And then the NARUC annual meeting will be in Anaheim, California in mid-November. There will be a packed agenda, of course. Registration is still open. There will also be a variety of exciting add-ons and side events, an emerging technology showcase on the Sunday afternoon, and opportunities to see battery energy storage at the utility scale and talk with CAISO and utility grid operators. And then a half-day load growth workshop where we're exploring assumptions and planning approaches. And then, as Catherine alluded to, we are co-hosting an IDSP, or Integrated Distribution System Planning and Electrification training and workshop, and that is open to state staff. We've particularly been collaborating across NASIO, NARUC, and ASUCA, but any state staff are welcome to join us for that training event. And registration is open now. There will also be subsequent repeats in March and April of next year, and even those dates and registrations are posted on the website. Last slide. I'm actually going to hand it off to Alex at this point, but please do check out the NARUC website to find the details and get into any of the registrations that you might like. Thank you.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much, Danielle. My name is Alex McCord. I'm a policy specialist with NCSL's energy program, and you can go to the next slide. So NCSL is the National Conference of State Legislators, and it is the bipartisan organization representing the legislators of our nation's states, commonwealths, and territories. So our mission is to advance the effectiveness, independence, and integrity of legislators, and to foster interstate cooperation by facilitating the exchange of information among legislators. So NCSL promotes nonpartisan information. We do not advocate or endorse policies at the state level or write model legislation. We do have a DC office, though, that does advocate on behalf of the state at the federal level. And so NCSL as an organization conducts research on all policy areas, not just energy. But today I'll just be sharing some updates of the work that our energy team has specifically been doing. We can go to the next slide. So here's some recent and upcoming events that the energy team has been working on. So this past August, we had NCSL's Legislative Summit. So this is NCSL's big conference, organization-wide, every year. It's the largest convening of state legislators in the country, and it was held in Louisville, Kentucky in August. And at this meeting, we had 4 energy-focused sessions on EV charging, data center energy demand, new nuclear technology, and state right of first refusal laws for transmission infrastructure. Then also in Louisville, the day before the summit, our Energy Staff Network met. And so the Energy Staff Network is a group of a few dozen legislative staff who focus on energy policy. And this group's a bit unique because unlike our other groups, which are primarily focused on legislators, this one is completely made up of legislative staff. And in addition to this annual meeting at Summit every year, the group also meets virtually on a quarterly basis. Then we also have an energy security working group, which is made up of both legislators and legislative staff. And this group focuses on threats to energy security, whether those threats are physical threats, cyber attacks, or natural disaster or climate-related threats. And so this group met in Baltimore last month at a meeting hosted in partnership with the National Emergency Management Association. And similar to the Energy Staff Network, this group also meets on a quarterly basis and is we're planning to have these two groups, the Energy Staff Network and Energy Security Working Group, convene for a joint virtual meeting in December this year. And then also we have our Legislative Energy Horizon Institute, or LEHI. So this is an annual program designed to educate state legislators and policymakers about the American energy infrastructure and delivery system. And so a new class of legislators is selected each year to participate in 2 3.5-day sessions. And these sessions really provide a great base level education of the energy sector just in general. And so this group met already this year in Richland, Washington this July at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And we'll have a second meeting next month in Washington, D.C. And we work on this group with NGA as well. Then another working group we have is the Nuclear Legislative Working Group. So pretty similar to our Energy Security Working Group, but this one's focused on nuclear policy issues. This group meets twice a year, meeting this past July in Chicago, and they toured the Argonne National Laboratory. And then they'll be meeting also next month back in Baltimore. Then finally, we have the Energy Supply Task Force, which is kind of our premier group with the energy program here at NCSL. So this task force started back in 2009 and brings legislators and staff together to discuss critical energy issues that policymakers are facing. So it really facilitates the collaboration among legislators to ensure long-term and stable energy supply. So they met earlier this year in Quebec City, Canada, back in May. They also met for a quick breakfast at our summit in Louisville to just kind of discuss the outlook for the year, what they're hoping to see with our next meeting, which will be early December in Denver. And then also I'd like to mention Base Camp is another NCSL-wide event similar to Summit, but this one is entirely virtual, and it's coming up at the end of the month. And our energy team is planning a session during Base Camp focused on interconnection queues, and that session will be on October 29th. And we can move on to the next slide. So here's quite a few resources NCSL has recently been working on. I'm not going to go through them all, but we do have a number of reports and briefs on various energy issues, as well as a lot of shorter publications like our toolkits, which help direct legislators to relevant resources for additional information on a topic. So for example, this year we released a toolkit on energy efficiency for low-income households and renters. And we do have a few more publications that we're hoping to release by the end of the year. We're working on Grid 101 series, which is a collection of quick summaries on various grid topics. And so we're hoping to have the first one of those series published next week, which will be focused on grid resilience against extreme weather events. And then we're also currently working on 2 issue briefs, one on right of first refusal laws, and then another on carbon capture technology. And then we're also in the early stages of beginning work on our 2024 Energy Trends Report, The Trends Report is a publication we put together every year that highlights the major themes we've seen in terms of state energy legislation each year. And that will probably be out early 2025. Then also you see on the right, we have we have various web pages, like our Energy State Bill tracking database that we maintain. And then we also host various webinars throughout the year. We can move on to the next slide. NCSL also has a number of different newsletters we post. I've highlighted 4 here. We have our News Reactor, which is a nuclear-focused newsletter that is released every other month. Then Plugged In is our more general energy newsletter that covers all issue areas related to energy, and that's released on a monthly basis. We also have a monthly environment and natural resources newsletter. And then finally, I've also highlighted Capital here, which is published by our DC office and focuses on federal legislation that could impact states. Next slide. Then finally, a few other forms of media. So NCSL has regular town halls, which feature conversations between state legislators and staff. And then we also have podcast series that the energy team regularly contributes to. So far this year, we've uploaded podcasts relating to the state role in transmission planning, as well as data centers. And we also have 2 more podcasts planned for the remainder of this year, one on resilience to wildfires, grid resilience to wildfires, and then also on the outlook for nuclear energy. Next slide. So yeah, that is it for NCSL. I have my contact information down the bottom. I've also included Brian Law is a brand new associate director for our energy team. He just joined NCSL this week. And so since he's brand new, wasn't quite ready to present today, but he will be involved with NCP more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you to all of our speakers today. What a wonderful set of events. I think the next slide that's going to pop up is slide 11, which is the slide that shows the NCEP webpage, which is where the recording for this webinar will be posted, and the presentation that everyone can. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here today, and again, we don't have any questions in the Q&A, but again, if you have any questions, you are welcome to email them directly to me, and my email address is dreynolds, DREYNOLDS, @naruc.org, and I am happy to pass those questions to others along on this call, to our other presenters, and also happy to try and connect you all to things that will help you out. That is it for our webinar today. Again, I want to thank all of our participants for all the work that they did to put these slides together and to really give all of you sort of a quick view into all the work that we are all doing. Again, thank you so much for being here today, and we greatly look forward to seeing some of you in Phoenix in just 2 weeks. Thanks so much.